In this video, we're going to look at debugging a while loop, and we're going to trace through how a while loop executes, and we're going to look at these variables, this I variable, and we're going to watch it as we go through this loop and see what happens and when things happen. So let's start out by coming over here. Before I initialize this variable I, I'm going to click on line 7 right there. I'm going to click right on the 7. And that's going to put a breakpoint at this line, which means when I run this with debugging, my execution will stop at this line and will only execute each line one at a time as I go through them. And I can watch what's happening in my program rather than when we did Welcome to Java 100 times before, it took a total of 0 seconds. This actually allows us to stop and watch what's happening. Okay, so I click the line number to put the breakpoint in, and now instead of coming up to the Run Project button, I'm going to the Debug Project button, which is one step to the right, and I am going to run this project with debugging. And immediately what happens is it comes and it gets to my breakpoint, and it shows us in green that this is the next line that will execute. It has not executed yet. It also opened up the variables window down here, and I can see any variables that exist in my program. Now, args is actually a variable that comes from right here in our main method. We have that variable args, and we can see it. It doesn't contain anything, so there's nothing to really look at for that right now. I doesn't exist yet because we haven't initialized I, so we don't see it down here, but we will as soon as we run this line. So to run this line, I'm going to go up here to my debugging tools that appeared when I started debugging. And the step over button, it's got the little arrow that points down around. Steps over any function calls that might be happening, and it will just run the next line of our code. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it just ran this statement that initialized I equal to 0. Now, if I hover my mouse over I can actually look in the little pop-up here. It tells me that I is an int and it's set equal to 0. I can also look down here in my variables window, and I can see an entry for I that's of type int, and it is set equal to 0. So now I'm going to look at this. My I is 0. I is less than 100, so this test should be true. So when you're running a debugger, you always want to ask yourself as you go from line to line, what do you expect to happen? Okay, I expect that since this test is true, that it's going to come down and run the code inside this block. Okay, so when I hit step over, let me hit step over, and we can see that it happened. That test was true, so it's coming down here. The next line that will run is this print line statement. This says Welcome to Java. Okay, and that ran. Now we don't see the output window because it's over here. The variables window's up front. If I go over to output, I can see there's Welcome to Java. Got printed one time. I go back to my variables window. My next line that runs is I++, so I'll hit my next button up here, my step over button. Okay, I got increased, so I is now equal to 1. I can see that by hovering over the I anywhere that it appears. I can see I equals 1. I can also come down here to my variables window and see that I equals 1. And I can continue on. Now, I'm going to stop. I'm going to change this to 2. So I don't have to go through this 100 times to demonstrate it to you. And I'm going to run it with debugging again. So we're starting the same spot we did. I is equal to 0. We did the test. We did our first print. I is now equal to 1. 1 is less than 2, so I expect it to run this block. Now I is equal to 2. So 2 is not less than 2. So what do I expect to happen now? Okay, I expect it to skip this block of code and come down here and run this statement. So if I hit step over again, it does. It shows us that this will be the next statement to run, and I can hit it and we can run it. If we go to our output window, we can see it printed Welcome to Java twice and then went to done. So be sure to practice using those debugging tools. They will help you a lot more than just staring at your code. Run through your code one line at a time and always ask yourself what you expect to happen. Click the button to do a step over. See if what you expected to happen actually happened, and if it didn't, you have to ask yourself why, and maybe there's something wrong with the line that you were just looking at. And that's how you use the debugger for a loop.